Prizepicks sports betting type video, and I'm here to tell you we made it. And by a lot of you, I mean like the 4 of you that commented about it in the last video. But yeah, no fear, we have arrived. I've got 8 Prizepicks props for you for this upcoming Super Bowl weekend, and I am ready to share them with you. But before we can get into it, I do have to address some things. Number 1, I just want to put this disclaimer out there. I am no professional. I am as amateur as you can be when it comes to sports betting. Any video I have ever put out on this channel is purely for fun, and it is honestly very stingy gambling. I always bet with the lowest possible amounts. If you've ever seen my tickets that I put up at the end, the slips, I'm betting like $5, maybe $10 per weekend. So yeah, this is very low stakes. And on top of that, a lot of the tips, tricks, and loopholes I suggest are ways to absolutely minimize the amount of money that you are losing. So if you are trying to make big money, this is not the right place. If you are trying to earn maybe an extra lunch next week, then you've come to the right place. This is very low stakes, purely for fun, and yeah, I'm just putting this out there because I like researching in it. I'm going to do it, and I figure I may as well share the research with you. Now I've had a couple comments telling me that this is a sham or a scam of sorts, and I truly apologize. I was never trying to make anyone lose their money. That was not my intent at all. I hope that people are not losing lots of money on advice from me. I whisper in front of a camera and I watch football recreationally. Like, I am no guru in any way, shape, or form. So please bet responsibly, bet safely, and fact check with other sources. If you don't like what I have to say, don't follow it, please. And yeah, with that being said, I do have to defend whatever little amount of reputation that I do have. So if you don't care about this segment at all, I'm gonna put chapters on this video so you can skip right ahead to the actual Super Bowl props section. But for those of you claiming that this is a sham or a scam, I see what you're saying. I don't put up my research, and I will change that. I will show you all the research that I did for this video. So every single prop that I do, I'm gonna put up the full write-up, or I'm gonna say the full write-up, and I'm going to include all the websites and stats and figures that I'm looking at so you can see it on the screen. But along with that, I just want to take a review on the props that I've put out this past playoff season. Since we are pulling up receipts, so far these playoffs, I have suggested 37 props on camera. These come across 3 videos. The first video was for the Super Wild Card weekend. The second video was for the divisional weekend, and the third video was for the AFC and NFC championship game. So yeah, 3 videos worth of picks, 37 total. You might be wondering, what was the success rate? What is this guy any good? And no, I haven't been making money off of it. I'm not doing well in the actual betting part of it. But the reads are pretty solid, I must say. Of the 37 picks that I have proposed to you guys, 27 of those have hit. If you take 27 and divide it by 37, the number that you get is 0.73. 73% hit rate is not bad. I will take it. This is my Linsanity run. I may never hit this number ever again. It's probably the most successful I've been in terms of reads. And just for context, some of the most successful quarterbacks in the NFL in terms of winning percentage ever, they're also in that mid-70s range. I'm talking Tom Brady, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, one of you is upset and passionate about this. And I'm here to, just return that energy and show you, like, this is the work that I put in. This is the outcome. So, let me just wiggle these around a little bit, get my stats organized, and I will let you know. Okay, so we'll start off with wildcard weekend. First up, we had Chris Godwin receiving yards. His line was set at 55.5. My pick, I took the over. His actual yards, 45. So, I lose. I'm wrong. That's my first miss. After that, you've got David Njoku, fantasy score of 13 points and receiving yards, 57.5. I took the over on both of these. What happened? Of his 13-point line, he got 16.3, and on 57.5, he cleared the over with 93. So that's 2 hits. Then I had Jalen Warren, and I had him over on receptions. His line was set to 3. He finished with 2. So another miss. I'm 2 for 2 to start. After that, Joe Flacco passing yards, line set at 272.5. I took the over. He finished with 307. Josh Allen completions. His line was set at 19.5. I took the over. He finished with 21. Josh Allen fantasy score. I don't have it. I think it was set at 20, 21 maybe. I took the over. He finished with 33. Josh Allen pass plus rush yards, 258.5. I took the over. He had 277. Matthew Stafford fantasy score, 18 points. I took the over. He finished with 22.68. Matthew Stafford passing yards. His line was set at 275.5. I took the over, and he finished with 367. Puka Nacua receiving yards. His line was set to 76.5. I took the over. He finished with 181. Sam Laporta. I was hoping that Prizepicks would put up more. The only thing I showed on the screen was his anytime touchdown prop. I was hoping that they would give him more, but he was injured, so they were being cautious. But even that hit. So 0.5 touchdowns. I was saying that things are positive for him. Take the over on things. So if you took the over on anytime touchdown, you would have cashed because he got 1 touchdown. Travis Kelce receiving yards. Line set at 58.5. Finished with 71. Travis Kelce receptions. Line set at 5.5. Took the over. He hit 7. Tua Tagovailoa completion percentage. 64.3 was his line. This was the only under that I ever suggested. And he cleared it easy. He finished with 51.3 completion percentage. Tua Tagovailoa pass attempts. His line was set at 32.5. I recommended the over. He finished with 39. So, in that first set, you had, 16 picks, and 14 were correct. So 14 of 16 on wildcard weekend. Pretty nice, pretty nice. We move into the divisional round. First up, Amon-Ra St. Brown, receiving yards. His line was set at 93.5. I recommended the over. I was wrong. He finished with 77. My bad. Then you have Baker Mayfield pass attempts, 35.5. I said take the over. He hit 39. That's cash. Then Christian McCaffrey rushing yards, line set to 92.5. I said take the over. He hit it at 98. This one is funny. Clyde Edwards-Helaire receiving yards set to 3.5 yards. Very, very, very small. I knew he was going to get maybe 1 or 2 catches, but I digged it. I said over. He finished with -1 yards, so, I'll take the blame on that one. If all your money was riding on that one pick, that is on me. That is fully my fault. I apologize. But we keep going. George Kittle receiving yards, 54.5. I said take the over. 81 was his actual. George Kittle yards in first 2 catches, 21.5 was the line. I said take the over. He hit 41. Isaiah Likely fantasy score set at 9.5. I said take the over. He finished this segment of picks, I was significantly worse actually. Let's see, 18 to 29. So there were 11 picks. I went 6 and 5. Not great at all. But wait a second. Did I really? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh. Does that make sense? Are these numbers numbering? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, not quite. The numbers aren't weird. I went 7 and 5, not 6 and 5. So I'll take that, still above 500. Not the worst. It could be bad. And then finally we move into the last round of the playoffs, which was the AFC and NFC championship round. Obviously there were only 2 games, so there were a few less props for me to push out. And so I only had a handful. I want to say this is, 8 picks. Let's see how I did. First up, you had Brock Purdy pass attempts. 30.5 was the line when I suggested it. He barely cleared this at 31, so if you got it at the right time, it was a good read. It did get bumped to 31.5, and at that point it wouldn't have cashed, but that is more of a timing thing. The read still solid. Then you've got Christian McCaffrey rushing yards. This was a free square, so really, yeah, I didn't do anything on this one. His line was set to 0.5 yards. Obviously, he was gonna hit the over, and he hit the over with 90. After that, you have George Kittle yards in first 2 catches. His line was set at 21.5. I said take the over. He finished with 27, and this one was pretty nice because George Kittle had a pretty abysmal day in all of his other props. Someone else said that I think he chalked everything else, so I'm pretty happy with this one. Then Harrison Butker kicking points 6.5. I said take the over. I was wrong. I was confidently wrong. He finished with 5 points. So that's another oopsie on my end. I did not deliver. After that, Jahmyr Gibbs receiving yards. His line was set at 22.5. I said take the over. He finished at 11. Volume was there, just couldn't convert. My bad. After that, Jared Goff pass attempts. His line was set at 36. I said take the over. He finished at 31, so that's another hit. Patrick Mahomes pass touchdowns. His line was set at 1.5. I said take the over. He finished with 1. That is my mistake. I was wrong. After that, Sam Laporta receptions set at 5. I said take the over. He finished with 9. After that, you've got Travis Kelce receptions. Line set at 6. I said take the over. Finished with 11. So, that is a review of all my credentials. The 37 picks that I've suggested. The 27 picks that I got right. The 10 picks that I got incorrect. If we're going on a round-by-round basis, yeah, I haven't been getting better. Obviously, when there's more games, there's more to pick from. There are easier reads. So, I'm declining. I'm getting worse. My first weekend was the best, 14 of 16. Then, 7 and 5. So, 14 and 2. Then, 7 and 5. And then, most recently, 7 and 3. I'll still take it. Those are all winning records. It's not bad. So, just wanted to get that out of the way. I have no honor to defend, really. There's no one relying on me for actual money-making things. But just for the sake of it, I decided, why not? Why not review how this has been going thus far, for transparency's sake? So, hopefully anyone that comes across this video will know what they're getting into. And know that this is amateur hour. Absolutely. But also, amateur hour is panning out pretty solidly. So take all advice with a grain of salt and double down with your own research, of course. And if you don't like what I have to say, you don't have to listen to it at all. It is bogus, mumbo jumbo, garbage nonsense. So if you have stuck around year, there's going to be the most money bet on this game of any game on any sport in the entire world. I'm pretty sure. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the Kentucky Derby makes a lot more money, but I think in terms of like online betting, this is pretty high up there. The Super Bowl, very bet on thing. You can bet on the color of the Gatorade of the winning team. You can bet on how long the national anthem is going to be. You can bet on if the coin is going to flip heads or tails. The options are limitless, but on Prizepicks they are pretty limited. So there are 8 that I have lined up for you guys, and let me just go over all 8 so you can hear them all once, and then I'll break down each one systematically so you can see the research that went into the rationale and logic behind each pick. Now, first one is a gimme. Prizepicks does this promo every Super Bowl, and it is the 0.5 passing yards free square. Patrick Mahomes has a square out there that is set to 0.5 passing yards, so if he throws for 1 yard in the Super Bowl, that is going to cash. I think you know. I think you know that that's a definite over, and yeah, that's not me. That's not me doing any research at all. That is just me informing you about it. So make sure you use that one to your advantage. The only caveat with that is there is a $25 betting limit with the free square. So whatever you do, the total number of bets that you can use that Mahomes free square in can only tally up to $25. So maybe you can make $5 bets. Maybe you can make one $25 bet. You can do it any way that you like. Just know that one is a guaranteed square. So use that to your advantage. One thing that I do is I split it $12.50 2 ways. Say I take Patrick Mahomes over 0.5 passing yards and something random, Christian McCaffrey 90.5 rushing yards. I'll put the over on McCaffrey's rushing yards in one, and I'll put the under on McCaffrey's rushing yards on the other. Both of them, I'll put Patrick Mahomes over 0.5 passing yards. And then after the game ends, obviously one or the other is going to hit. You put in $12.50. You are guaranteed to return 37.5 on one of the 2 slips. One is going to hit, one is going to fail, but it doesn't really matter because you put $25 in, you get 37.5 back. You're guaranteed $12.50 of profit. These are the stakes we are playing for. Like, I am helping you make $12.50. That is a singular lunch, maybe 2 if you're really good with coupons. But yeah, these are the stakes. But after that, let's move into my first real pick, and that would be Isiah Pacheco over 68.5 rushing yards. Then I've got Travis Kelce over 17 fantasy score. Travis Kelce over 71.5 receiving yards. Then Brock Purdy over 12.5 rushing yards. Brock Purdy over 30.5 pass attempts. Kyle Juszczyk over 4.5 rushing and receiving yards. And finally, George Kittle under 11.5 fantasy score. So these are the 7 true researched picks that I have, and I'll go through them one by one, starting off with Isiah Pacheco. Well, actually, let's start off with the defensive stats of these 2 teams. I use this one website called Draft Edge, and Draft Edge is very nice because they compile all of the games that occur in a season, and then they come up with rankings on every team, every team's defense against every skill position. So you have each team's defense and how they stack up against quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. And then on top of that, they will give you a breakdown of each category. So against quarterbacks, there is a separate ranking for passing yards, passing touchdowns, passes over 20 yards, passes over 40 yards, rushing yards by a quarterback, and rushing touchdowns by a quarterback. And then they'll take all of that, they'll give you their daily fantasy score, how quarterbacks usually fare against them, and then they'll give you a column for how they are doing on average. So, for the quarterbacks, you have the 49ers defense. Opposing quarterbacks in fantasy score average over 40 plus yards, they're number 5. That is solid. That is good. Rush yards, they rank number 9. And rush touchdowns, they rank number 2. So overall, 49ers passing defense and quarterback rushing defense. Very nice. Then you've got the Chiefs defense against opposing quarterbacks. Daily fantasy score, 16.1. That is 1.3 points below the average. So this is pretty good defense as well. In terms of passing, they are phenomenal. Number 4 in passing yards allowed. Number 5 in passing touchdowns allowed. Number 1 in passes over 20 yards allowed. And number 3 in passes over 40 yards allowed. So throwing on the Kansas City secondary, it's not easy at all. Top 5 in all of the major categories. Running on them, on the other hand, that's where you'll have your success. Number 27 in rush yards allowed to opposing quarterbacks, and number 27 in rush touchdowns allowed. Let's move into the running backs. 49ers defense allows 25 daily fantasy score to opposing running backs. That's 1.6 points below the average. They're number 6 ranked in terms of rush yards allowed, number 15 in rush touchdowns allowed, number 11 in rushes over 20 plus yards allowed, number 25 in rushes of over 40 yards allowed, number 25 in receiving yards allowed, number 3 in receiving touchdowns allowed, and number 29 in receptions allowed to opposing running backs. So, if you are a receiving back going against the Niners, you can tally a decent number of catches and receiving yards. Obviously, this is what I was targeting when I was suggesting Jahmyr Gibbs, so it doesn't always work out, but that is the read there. After that, you've got the Chiefs defense, 19.2 daily fantasy score allowed, which is 2.4 points below the average. In terms of rushing yards, they are ranked number 15, middle of the pack. Rushing touchdowns, number 3. Rushes over 20 yards allowed, number 5. Rushes over 40 yards allowed, number 31. Receiving yards, number 12. Receiving touchdowns, number 13. So basically, for these two defenses, they're very good at limiting the running backs, but if a running back happens to escape the containment, they can go off for a lot. That's what it's saying. Okay, so then after that, you've got the wide receivers. 49ers defense. 49ers defense against opposing wide receivers. 34.9 daily fantasy score allowed, which is 1.4 points above the average. They rank number 13 in receiving yards allowed, number 20 in receiving touchdowns allowed, number 27 in receptions allowed, number 11 in catches of over 20 yards, and number 10 in catches of over 40 yards. So, kind of a mid secondary when it comes to wide receivers. The Chiefs, on the other hand, 28.3 daily fantasy score allowed, which is 5.2 points below the average. You've got them ranked number 6 in receiving yards allowed, number 8 in receiving touchdowns, number 6 in receptions, number 10 in receptions over 20 yards, and number 9 in receptions over 40. Once again, hard to throw on this Chiefs secondary. And lastly, you have the tight ends. First up, the 49ers tight end defense, 11.7 daily fantasy score allowed, which is 0.4 points below the average. They are number 13 ranked in receiving yards allowed, number 6 ranked in receiving touchdowns allowed, number 25 in receptions allowed, number 11 in receptions over 20 yards allowed, and number 6 in receptions of over 40 yards allowed. So, in terms of yardage and catch, they are a little softer, but they're pretty good at preventing the very long play receptions and receiving. So receiving backs against the Niners can have some success. After that, the 49ers defense against wide receiver receptions. So they give up a lot of passes. You see maybe who in that wide receiver group can catch the ball a lot. And then after that, the 49ers defense once again against tight end receptions. So they give up a lot of catches to tight ends who can maybe capitalize on that. And then these are the holes on defense, but what comes with that are the strengths. So where are the defenses the strongest? The Chiefs' defense against tight ends is very notable. One of the best. And the Chiefs' defense against quarterbacks passing. So we have to keep all of this in mind. These are the key takeaways from everything that we've just seen. Based on that, I'm now going to explore each of these as exploits or as potential warning signs, and that is where I come up with the reads. So typically, now that I've found these positional advantages or disadvantages, I'm going to look into this season's history and playoff history to come up with some sort of basis on whether I think the player is going to meet or not meet the line that is set for them at Prizepicks. So the first line that I suggested for you guys was Isiah Pacheco over 68.5 rushing yards. Now, as I said, the 49ers defense was not particularly soft against opposing rushing running back. It was more vulnerable to receptions and receiving, but unfortunately, there are no good lines for Isiah Pacheco in the receiving game. As far as I checked, there were none at all. There was one receiving prop for Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but I've already made that mistake once. I wasn't going to do it again. So I, turned the chapter, decided to look into these playoffs, how opposing running backs have been doing on the ground against the 49ers, and it's actually been pretty successful for the opposing teams. The 49ers have played 2 games in this offseason, one against the Green Bay Packers and one against the Detroit Lions. In the game against the Packers, Aaron Jones was the leading rusher. He had 18 carries for 108 yards. Then against the Lions, they are more of a two-headed monster. You had David Montgomery getting 15 carries for 93 yards, which is pretty great efficiency. Then you had Jahmyr Gibbs getting 12 carries for 45 yards, which is a little less efficient, but the point still stands that they ran the ball 27 times and they got over 138 yards of rushing, and before that 108 yards rushing to Aaron Jones. So we have seen that teams can run on the Niners. It is definitely a possibility, especially in these last 2 games. Isiah Pacheco, on the other hand, the running back for the Chiefs, the leading back, he has been great in these playoffs. He has... Oh, man, this is small. Am I going to be able to read this? Okay. In his last 5, he is averaging quite a bit, but in these playoffs thus far, his last game against the Ravens, a top rushing defense in the league, he got 68 yards. The week before that, against the Buffalo Bills, he got 97 yards. The week before that, against the Miami Dolphins, he got 89 yards. So his line is set at 68.5. He barely missed it last week, but he hit it the other 2 quite easily. And if we just take a look at his playoff career as a whole, it is not very many games. The sample size is small. It is 6 games. But of those 6 games, he hit it 4 times, including the last Super Bowl. He hooked last week. Hook is when you miss by a very small amount, which means it was a solid read, but it just didn't pan out. So he has 4 catches, 1 hook, and 1 miss. And that 1 miss was last year in the NFC Championship round. So his history indicates that he is able to hit 68.5. So based on his success recently, based on the Niners' lack of success stopping runners recently, and his pretty solid line of 68.5, I think that taking the over on Isiah Pacheco's 68.5 rushing yards is not a bad idea. Now, after that, I believe the next line that I recommended was for Travis Kelce. it was set to 6. I believe in week 1 of the playoffs it was set to 5. They have got on that, Mahomes really likes to throw to Travis Kelce. On the other hand, Travis Kelce's fantasy score line is set at 17 points. Now, I know what you're thinking. That is a lot of points. How is he possibly going to clear that? Well, honestly, Travis Kelce actually hits this with great consistency. It's steep, but he has hit this in 13 of his 17 games in the playoffs with Mahomes at quarterback. And on top of that, in his last 12 playoff games, Travis Kelce has hit this line in 11 of them. So, he scores. He is very productive in the playoffs. And it's not just this year. It goes back quite a few years. So, if you want any information on it, this is StatMuse. A lot of these graphics that you'll be seeing, they're all StatMuse graphics. It's a great platform where you can just type in questions, pull up history. It really depends on how you word your prompt if you're going to get the right thing or not. But this is what I pulled up. This is his resume in all of his games with Patrick Mahomes at quarterback. You'll see that he is very productive. And yeah, he is definitely a guy that can convert this line. He missed it against the Dolphins this year, but that is the one miss in his last 12 games, and it's the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl, there's going to be a lot of attention on the Chiefs because they were just in it. There's going to be a lot of attention on Travis Kelce, Taylor Swift. Travis Kelce just beat the record for most catches in a game. He is pretty productive in these Super Bowls too. Let's take a look. Last year in the Super Bowl, he had 6 catches for 81 yards and a touchdown. The Super Bowl before that, against Tampa Bay, it was a horrible, horrible game for the Chiefs. Travis Kelce still had 10 catches for 133 yards. The first Super Bowl against San Francisco, a little bit more of a quiet game from him, but he had 6 catches for 43 yards and a touchdown, and 2 rushing yards. So he would have barely missed it in that one. The team's different now, though. There's no Tyreek. They don't have a lot of trustworthy guys. Travis Kelce is going to be fed the ball. Last week he had 11 catches, and he had 11 targets. I don't see why that couldn't happen again. This guy's a ball magnet, and he will convert, I think, on his over on the 17 fantasy score. And, yeah, just for good measure, if you don't like fantasy score, his receiving yards line isn't bad either. It's set at 71.5, and he has, in his last 12 games, cashed this 11 times, and he hooked it once. The one game where he missed it was in the Miami game earlier this postseason. He finished with 71 yards. The line is set at 71.5. So, if you exclude that, he is 11 for 11, and he's barely missed on one. So, Travis Kelce, very productive in the playoffs. I think that the 49ers, even though they have a solid defense, it's Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, they're going to offensively scheme. They're going to find some way to exploit them. And I think Travis Kelce, regardless, is going to have a productive day. After that, I believe my next recommendation was for Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy rushing yards. So let's take a look at that. One of the notable holes in the Chiefs' defense, as I mentioned, was their defense against opposing quarterbacks in terms of rushing. Brock Purdy's line for this game is set at 12.5 rushing yards. Not very much. He is not the most dynamic dual-threat quarterbacks in the league. But as we saw last week, he can pick up the ball and go run down the field. Last week he had 5 carries for 48 yards in a very, very, necessary game. If he didn't pick up those first downs with his legs, I don't think they would have advanced past Detroit. So when the situation calls for it, he is going to run. In the game before that against Green Bay, he also ran 6 times for 14 yards. Then you have his game against the Eagles, which doesn't really count. He threw 4 passes and then he got hurt for the rest of the game. So let's omit that one from the record. Then you've got the divisional round game against the Cowboys, where he ran 3 times and he only gained 8 yards. But then his first ever playoff game, he ran 4 times and got 16 yards. So we have a 4-game sample size. He's hit it in 3 of these. In all of least 3 times. The Chiefs' defense this offseason has not been good at limiting the run either. You've got, in the 3 games, Tua Tagovailoa, 3 attempts for 25 yards, so he would have hit this 12.5-yard line. Josh Allen, obviously a much more run-heavy type of dude. He ran the ball 12 times, got 72 yards. So even though they can expect it, they still couldn't stop it. Then you got Lamar Jackson, another very run-heavy dude, and very good at running. 8 attempts, 54 yards. So everyone has been averaging 6 yards per carry or more. And Brock Purdy is going to run it 2 or 3 times at least. So if he has 2 runs of 6 yards, then he'll be at 12. If he has his 3rd run go for 1 yard, he's at 13. Last week we saw him run it 5 times for 48 yards, and we know that the Chiefs' defense is weak against this. So I don't think it is unreasonable to think that Brock Purdy is going to run the ball maybe 4 times, and I think in his 4 attempts, one of them is going to go for a first down. So 12.5 yards I think is very doable. I think that it's the Super Bowl. By all means, he is going to be scrambling. They've been down in all of these games in this postseason, and when it comes to it, you have to get that first down. So he's going to do it. 12.5 is pretty reasonable. I think that he cashes the over. After that, if you see a cut, it's because my roommate walked in and I had to cut the video and then restart. So, as I was saying before, I've got Brock Purdy over on his pass attempts. Now, this is one where I actually do think that credentials play a part. So far, while analyzing the 37 picks that I have recommended thus far, I noticed a couple things. My best 2 categories were fantasy score and pass attempts, completions, you could say. And my worst category was receiving yards. So do what you will with that information. It's also a very small sample size, but it seems like the most consistent hits have been in the 2 categories of fantasy score and in pass attempts, whereas it's more dicey when it comes to receiving yards. I haven't been as consistent or accurate on it, so I would, maybe let that play a factor into the advice that I give. But getting back into Brock Purdy's pass attempts for this game, right now his line is set at 30.5 pass attempts, but let's put that into context. The 49ers in this postseason run have played from behind in both of their games. They're trailing in the 4th to the Packers, and they're trailing in the 4th to the Lions. Now on the other side of this, the Chiefs' opponents in these playoff games, they have all been trailing. At one point the Chiefs went up in the 4th quarter, and then the opponent was given a chance to try and play catch up. This happened with the Bills, it happened last week with the Ravens for the entire second half, and it happened in the first week with the Dolphins as well. So the Chiefs were, I think, most behind in that Bills game, but then they took the lead, and so all of these teams have had an opportunity to play from behind against the Chiefs. What this means in terms of the 49ers being behind in the 4th quarter and the Chiefs being ahead in the 4th quarter is the 49ers are going to have to pass the ball. If you are behind in a game, clock management is, very integral and important. So you are going to have to pass the ball to stop the clock and make sure it doesn't run too much. And since we have seen this trend of the Niners trailing and the Chiefs leading, this isn't a bad assumption for us to make that the 49ers will maybe be behind in this game and have to try and catch up, and that is going to cause them to throw the ball. Now, let's take a look at the playoff history for this. Brock Purdy, very small sample size, both of the playoff games this year, he hit the over, but one thing that is very notable is his game against Green Bay. That was his career high in pass attempts with 39. Last week he hit 31. As I said, his line is currently set at 30.5 pass attempts. If we want to take a look at the opponents to get a frame of reference of what this could be, Tua Tagovailoa in the game against the Chiefs, 39 pass attempts. Josh Allen in the game against the Chiefs, 39 pass attempts. Lamar Jackson in the game against the Chiefs, 37 pass attempts. So all of the opponents thus far have cleared the line very easily against the Chiefs. Purdy has already set his own career high in pass attempts in this postseason run, and he has cleared this line in both of the games thus far. And I do think that it is possible that the 49ers play latter stages of this game, or maybe even early. Last week they were down in a big hole very early into the game. So yeah, it's not unfathomable that the 49ers will trail at some point. So I would say go ahead, take the over on Brock Purdy, 30.5 pass attempts. And after that, I believe this is the... Okay, there's two more. First, we'll go with the one that has the least amount of information. This is Kyle Juszczyk, over 4.5 rushing and receiving yards. 4.5 is a very small line, but the beauty of this one is it is rushing and receiving yards. If you're not familiar, Kyle Juszczyk is the fullback for the 49ers. Now, he is one of the best. He has some of the most Pro Bowls of all players in the NFL. But fullback usage is a little bit volatile. You don't know if they're going to be mostly blocking or if they're going to maybe see some action with the ball in their hands. And it's dicey because last week Kyle Juszczyk was very productive. He had, I think, like 35 yards against the Lions. Huge. He had like 2 big catches. It was big. Other games, it's been not really there. Like I want to say the 2 games before that, he didn't record a single stat. So I did some digging, and in my digging, I actually ran out of StatMuse graphics. I used up all my prompts. I tried to get around it, and I just could not. So I used up all of my StatMuse prompts looking into these picks, and I had to really pull up other devices and things like that, and those screenshots are just not going to transfer over. So there's no proof on this one. If you don't want to believe it, I fully understand why, since I'm not citing my sources. But if you want to take my word for it, Kyle Juszczyk has hit his line of 4.5 rushing and receiving yards in 7 of his last 10 playoff games, and this includes the last Super Bowl that the 49ers were in. He did it last week. There are a couple games where he got like 15 yards, and his usage is very versatile. Sometimes it's in the rushing game. He'll maybe get 2 carries. Sometimes it's in the passing game. Last week he had 2 very good chunk yardage plays, and it went for 36 yards, my mistake. And so I think they're going to look at the film and they're going to be like, wow, Kyle, that was a great play. Why don't we drop at least 1 or 2 wheel routes for you or something like that? And 5 yards is not a lot. He needs 5 yards to catch this. I think it's doable. It is one that is more risky just because it is such a low line, which means low volume, and those are the hardest to predict. But based on his success just last week, I think that they're going to have at least one play in the playbook for him, and that one play should take him over on this. So I take the over on Kyle Juszczyk, 4.5 rushing and receiving yards. And now the very last pick that I have to recommend to you guys is George Kittle, under 11.5 fantasy points. Now, this comes from the defensive strength of the Kansas City Chiefs against opposing tight ends. If we take a look at their, wow, I'm really blanking on the word. If we take a look at how they have stacked up against opposing tight ends in this NFL playoffs, you have the Dolphins game. The Dolphins leading tight end this year, Durham Smythe. He finished the game with 3 catches for 12 yards. Then, against the Bills, you have a 2-headed monster in Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox. Dalton Kincaid was the leading receiver for the Bills, but he finished with 5 catches for 45 yards. Dawson Knox, on the other hand, very limited, 1 catch for 4 yards. Then you have another 2-headed monster in the Ravens. Mark Andrews returns from injury. During his injured time, Isiah Likely was pretty productive. Both of these guys were pretty big duds. Likely finished with 2 catches for 16 yards. Mark Andrews finished with 2 catches for 15 yards. So no one has been able to be that productive. Dalton Kincaid was the most productive of this bunch, but even he was not able to hit an 11.5 fantasy point line. Now, let's take a look at George Kittle. George Kittle last week, not a good game. 3 targets, 2 catches, 27 yards. That would translate to 4.7 fantasy points. So if we take a look at his 11 playoff career games, he has only hit the over on 2 of these. One of them was against Green Bay earlier this offseason, but that was because Green Bay was especially bad at covering tight ends, so the read was there. Other than that, the only other time that he has cashed this is against Dallas, where he had 5 catches for 95 yards. Other than that, George Kittle is not consistently hitting this line. Under on 9 of the 11, that's a pretty consistent under rate. Then, if you want to pay attention to this season in specific, because obviously in previous seasons he didn't have Brock Purdy, yeah, it's not as nice, but he hit the under in 8 out of the 14 games with Debo active. Debo was missing for 3 games. In those 3 games, obviously Kittle got a few more looks, but in games where Debo is active this year, George Kittle hitting the under is still more favorable than him hitting the over. So you take that into account, that it's basically a 50-50 on George Kittle hitting this line on any given day. You take into account his playoff resume of him not really delivering on this line, and then you take into the fact that, like, Kansas City is practically the best against opposing tight ends, and doesn't spell out a successful day for George Kittle. So I'm a pretty optimistic dude. I hardly ever recommend an under. It's always over. But this is an exception. I do think that if there's any under that is worth taking in this game, it's the George Kittle fantasy score under on 11.5 points. So with that, I believe I have covered all of my 7 original picks. Just for review one more time, you've got the free pick for Patrick Mahomes over 0.5 passing yards. Then my recommendations: Isiah Pacheco over 68.5 rushing yards, Travis Kelce over 17 fantasy score, Travis Kelce over 71.5 receiving yards, Brock Purdy over 12.5 rushing yards, Brock Purdy over 30.5 pass attempts, Kyle Juszczyk over 4.5 rushing and receiving yards, and George Kittle under 11.5 fantasy score. Take these picks, mix and match them however you see fit. Maybe take some of them, maybe take all of them, maybe throw them all away. Whatever floats your boat. The most important thing is to have fun, really. If gambling stresses you out, don't do it. If you don't have money to gamble, don't do it. If you just view it as a bad habit, yeah, by all means, dislike the video. I do not mean to push this among those who are not willing to do it. And yeah, once again, if you're losing any money, I am deeply sorry. I really don't want people to be losing money. The intention is to minimize losses and minimize wins. We're really hitting that, like, bottom layer of barely profitable with these picks. So yeah, once again, maybe one lunch, maybe 2 lunches. We'll just have to see. And right now, as I record this, it is Friday. Prizepicks, they don't have a great Flex Friday promo anymore. You can't reroll credit, but if you are willing to have $20 turn into $20 in promo because you're going to make more picks later on in the future, then yeah, feel free to put together some of these picks into a Flex Friday $20 protected play. That's what I'm doing. If you want to see exactly which ones that which slips and props that I made, I'll put them up in this video so you can take a look. But yeah, thanks for watching. I hope you have a fantastic weekend and you enjoy the Super Bowl. All 17, 18 weeks of regular season, plus all these weeks of the playoffs build up to this moment. This is the biggest game, the biggest stage. It's a matchup we've seen before, but it's going to be a whole new story. It'll be a lot of fun. And, even the halftime show, I'm looking forward to every aspect of it. Kickoff, the national anthem, halftime show, and obviously all of the gameplay. So I hope you have a very happy